the right data, you explore it, you prepare it, you model it maybe, and then you figure out the right method to serve the results back to your business. So a POC would be the most reasonable unit of work, likely the thing they choose to say, in a relatively short period of time, can a task force build something that satisfies these users' needs and proves that there's value in continuing this in perpetuity. A second flavor of POC is to test out a potential new software, or a vendor, or a cloud platform, or a Snowflake, a data warehouse, whatever, to see if it meets the user's expectations, if it fits into your existing infrastructure and your processes, and if it's reasonably easy to use and learn. So I would bucket this as really a vendor eval, and of course at Dataiku we do a lot of these. But usually you choose a use case for that vendor eval, like the examples you see on the left. And ideally, and this is critical, it's one that you've already worked on in the past, so that you have a real life use case to actually test out the tool and get a real experience. So I'm going to pause at this point and ask, for those of you who've done maybe one of these, any experiences you want to share about maybe whether you've had better luck with one type or the other? Kind of curious.
Feel free to unmute.
Brave souls.
Yeah.
This is, of course, Paul. I'll speak up. Yeah, so I would say as a vendor evaluation, evaluating a BI tool, and defining the use case of what you really need it to do, how your business is going to use it. I think that's the really critical part. You can evaluate individual tools and say, what are the advantages and disadvantages? But we found we were much more effective when we predefined how will our business use this tool, and then evaluate the tool against how we were going to use it, not what did the tool do.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Rather than trying to find a problem or figure out the problem that you're trying to solve for, rather than the other way around. And I've definitely been on both sides of that. So you're right. I think one thing that can happen when people are doing, let's say, a vendor evaluation is to try to mix these two flavors. And so my first piece of advice is to not try to test both of these things at the same time. So let me explain. It seems really appealing to try to kill two birds with one stone. And here's an analogy for you. I've always been meaning to learn how to make Thai curry at home, but I've never gotten around to it. And I was given an Instant Pot for Christmas this year, which is sort of intimidating and sort of awesome for those of you guys who have Instant Potted. So I'm like, well, why not try to learn how to make Thai curry in my new Instant Pot, and then I can learn both at the same time. Seems like a really smart idea. But actually, if my curry turns out poorly, or it's like just meh, it's really hard for me to diagnose where I went wrong. Was it the recipe I used? Did I get the wrong ingredients? Did I screw up the adjusted cooking for the Instant Pot pressure? Like, you get the idea. It's really hard to disambiguate what went right and what went wrong when you try to do two new things at one time. And we see this all the time, is we've got to try out a new platform or a new software, and we've really been meaning to get to this like churn improvement problem. So let's do both, and then we'll be heroes at the end because we've solved our churn problem. Yep.
Isn't that part of what you were saying when you said both of these types tend to, or you use a vendor evaluation to answer a business question? How do you distinguish between, it's bad to mix these two, yet often you have a business question that you're doing a vendor evaluation proof of concept?
So I would recommend that you keep either the subject or the tool constant, so that you provide a good environment for an experiment. This is what this is, an experiment. So if you are trying to figure out if a new tool works for you, try it on the stuff that you already do. And we'll talk about this on the next slide, which is you have to have a benchmark. If you've never done something before, you don't know whether the new way is better, or it's just that this is just the first time you've done it. So if you try to solve a brand new problem with no idea of how long this would have taken you with your existing tools, how are you going to know whether this new one is better? It's going to be very subjective. So when you design your POCs, treat them like a scientific experiment. Like in high school chemistry, we learned the scientific method, we research, we form a hypothesis. We have a control and we analyze and document, and then we communicate the results. And in 7th grade, this didn't really seem important, but now it's like, oh, this is actually what we do working for data companies. So a lot of times people forget the measurement part. So in order to know if something's improved from the status quo, whether that's a business question or a new software, you have to measure something that represents the status quo. And I don't care what it is. It can be the number of hours that it takes your people to do something today. It can be, your churn numbers today or your conversion numbers on the website today, but you have to have some kind of baseline to measure against in order to really prove to the business, like the guy writing the check or the woman writing the check, well, there's an ROI here, and here's what it is.
So I have a follow-on question to that then. Plenty of companies going into and trying to do AI, right? And when you're doing AI, you don't have AI capability today. So I need AI to answer a question, but I've never done AI. So now how do I pick the right way to do AI? Because I can hire a consultant, I can buy software, right? And answer my business problem without doing those both at the same time.
So I would first work backwards from this piece of AI, this AI that you're trying to build. What's the goal? Is it to provide a brand new capability to your end customers that they never had before and delight them? With that, there's no other purpose other than to delight them. Then maybe there's a satisfaction metric or a loyalty and retention metric that you have in place. Or if it's AI to automate a process that today is manual, and you don't have, let's say, like robotic process automation, which is questionably AI, but let's assume that it is. You've never had it before, but yet you know how long it takes these people to do their work manually, roughly. And you can price out the cost of their salaries and the time it takes and things like that. So I would get your baseline from the thing you're trying to affect and what you're going to tell the CEO that your thing did to the bottom line. You don't have a comparison for a new chatbot. We've never had a chatbot before, but our call center volume is down and our resolution time is down and our claims are down. And those are metrics that we do measure. Right. So pricing the actual quantification is a really important part of a POC. Because at the end of it, people are going to go, well, it seems better.
I'm still seeing a bunch of test tubes. Is that what you intend?
Yeah.
Okay.
So don't forget that it's just a measurement device that should get you in a short period of time to a conclusion. And the conclusion is green, yellow, red. Not a good fit. Move on. Okay. We learned some stuff. Better luck next time. Shows promise. We need more cycles. Okay. Course correct and try again. And then lastly, this is good. Let's clean it up. Let's put it into production. Right. That's kind of where you want to get to in a relatively short period of time. Usually 2 to 4 weeks is a POC. Okay. So what can go wrong?
I have a note here. Someone was noting that I would strongly agree that in terms of AI, there are many cases where human hours can be shown as savings and value. Some people compound this value as well as due to the fact that these resources may then perform more valuable work or focus their role on something that provides new business value. Good point, Trevor. Thanks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when you think about data scientists, I mean, these are the people that we sell to at Data IQ, it's not that it's going to replace them. It's going to allow them to spend more time doing the really cool, hard problems that they want to do instead of taking all their time doing data prep and wrangling and chasing down the business for answers. We're spending time writing Python scripts that are super, super routine and should be automated. So yeah, you free them up to do higher value work and they get retained, and there's an ROI to that also. Keeping that really high value talent. Your cloud architects, things like that, they cost a lot of money. So keeping them happy is important. So Sometimes the challenges facing your POC can be systemic and organizational, and that's completely normal. So here are some of the main challenges that we see. You don't have enough people to meet the demand for things your business wants to try, or you don't have people with the right kind of skill sets, especially as we move into cloud. Or maybe it's not a lack of people with analytical skill sets. It's rather that the systems and the people in all these different domains live in silos and they don't connect. And it's really hard to go from end to end and get something productionalized. And then this is partly kind of where I'm coming from, which is what happens a lot of times is you have this endless design cycle, endless prototypes, where it takes so long to get the data and to figure out the data dictionary and to do the analysis. And then by that time, the business has sort of lost interest. And then they come back and they tell you a few tweaks to make, and you go do it back and forth. And at the end, the finish line keeps moving. You never, it kind of quietly dies. I mean, this was my experience with a lot of projects, and you feel like you spin your wheels. And from a retention perspective, that's very frustrating for the employees. They spent all this time and it didn't go anywhere. So, by the way, I won't belabor the point, but this slide is exactly kind of why Data IQ exists. We came into being to fix these types of problems, like the glue between these departments and allowing people to work together to get to the point where the project actually reaches orbit. So, before we talk about how to design a good POC, let's check out some of the sneakier pitfalls. And these are like this is why I have the wolf in sheep's clothing. These are the ones that come cloaked in really innocent and the best of intentions. So here are a few examples of things that sound like great ideas on the surface, but actually can make it really hard for a POC to succeed. The first is this idea that to wow people with the results of our POC, we've got to have something that's pretty good. And it's got to be really tuned to our business. And it's going to seem so perfect that they can't help to see how great this is. And this one, the one that really hits home with me is I used to do a lot of text analytics. And so for text analytics, sometimes you classify things into categories or bins, and you create a taxonomy, a foldering structure for your documents. And so a good POC just has like a minimum number of buckets to show that it can be done, and the accuracy shouldn't be perfect, nor should anybody expect it to be perfect. Text is not perfect. But what happens when people work on these is they think, oh, well, we should have a subcategory. And then that subcategory should have another subcategory. And then we should roll them all up this way. And then they've got this huge taxonomy. Beautiful. But in the end of your POC, it's sparsely populated, accuracy so-so. And then you show it to the business and they're like, well, this isn't exactly what we need. And you spend a ton of time perfecting something that wasn't even that useful to the end user. So this perfection over prototype mentality can really kill you, and you run down the wrong path. Decisions by committee. So you might think, well, we need to have all the people involved who are going to be involved in the end. If we put this into production, we got to get buy-in from marketing and sales and blah, blah, blah. And we all know what decision by committee is like, right? It's good to get consensus, but anything more than like 8 people can just slow things down. So this is where agile methodology really comes in handy. You've got to have a leader who can kind of make some decisions, keep people in hand. 3 to 8 people is about the right size.
There was a good comment in the chat from Steve Erbach. A committee was a life form with 3 or more stomachs and no brain. Robert Heinlein.
Yeah, it's there's a fine balance there, but the people I talk to say, you need to have the technical skill sets, one of each, and then a leader to keep all the cats herded, right? And beyond that, just carve away the committee, okay, so they can move fast. And then the last thing is a constantly moving finish line. And so we talk about this MVP, this minimum viable product that will be kind of the check mark that our POC is done, but it never quite seems to be the bar that stays still, right? It keeps the scope creep. And so I would urge you to be very firm to say, we don't care if we really don't have anything impressive at the end of 2 weeks. That's a learning. It took us this long to get to that point. That's a learning. Don't keep moving the bar. The POC will never end. Okay. So, questions, comments?
There's some comments in the chat that were nice. The slide gives a nice framework because people are kind of seeing themselves as lambs versus the wolf in there, and how they're working. Things are happening in their company. And Nicole shared that you thought there was a great definition of done and minimum viable product for the business and technical folks, both.
Yep. So figure out what that is at the beginning. Don't change it halfway through. Okay, so the second half of this talk is really about a framework you can use to put, to set yourself up for success when you're planning a new project. And this is going to seem so Mickey Mouse, you're going to actually question whether there's any value in it, but hang in here with me. We're going to use the 5 W's and how. Okay, so I can share these slides with you in case they're useful for you or your teams, but the idea is before you start, what happens is a lot of times you have a lot of candidates for projects, and you've got to figure out which ones are the good candidates to put resources against. So you start to kind of fill out this rubric for each candidate for a POC. The first one is who. Who is this for? Is this for our customers, our external customers? Maybe we're B2B, maybe we're B2C. Like, who is this for, our customers, or is this for our employees to make their life better? We automate some terrible routine thing they do. It's for our internal employees. And don't forget that, I think I have a slide. Yeah, I'll come to it. So be specific. What specific personas, what people, what do they do today that we're going to specifically improve? Do we have somebody who can speak on behalf of that external audience, who really knows them super well and can be their advocate? Don't forget that AI can be exploited in a kind of 2-step way. So you build a machine learning model, it's embedded into a system that recommends something for an agent or for a customer on the website. So even though you're building for an internal system, the secondary customer is the customer, the external one. So just be specific when you think about who it's for. How it's going to help them. This goes back to that question about, well, we've never had AI before, but we have measures around risk and revenue and costs, and we have to figure out what this AI is supposed to help us with. Okay, what are the key metrics? Again, measurement, and who's going to be calculating this? A lot of times what happens is you make the baseline, and there's actually no system in place to capture the difference. So if any of you guys have done online advertising and you know about A/B testing and putting a different ad in like the spot, it's all very good to know what the click-through rate was before, but if you don't have a measure, like any kind of mechanism, Google Analytics or whatever, to tell you what the click rate is on your new thing, you're not measuring it as it goes. So make sure you put the mechanism in place to measure the new thing before you put it into production. And then how long do you wait before you measure? Because sometimes it takes a while, especially with AI, for things to get good. The first like 7 or 8 iterations are not so great. So when are you going to say, okay, now we start to measure? Okay. Why is AI better than what we do today? Okay, AI is cool. Kind of bandwagony. We want to say we're doing it. But is it better than what we do? If we spend a ton of time creating that taxonomy to categorize 100 surveys that somebody could do in an hour with no experience, is that actually worth it? Is the scale enough to justify the investment for the NLP? Maybe, maybe not. And this is one where you might fight people higher up who say to you, yeah, automate this, do this cool thing. And you think, actually, what we do works pretty well. It's important to have an open mind both ways. Okay, what's the upside if we succeed? What is the worst that can happen if we fail? What is the risk? Okay, this helps you pick projects that I like that quote, from Dan Lattimore. If you succeed, this is going to be inspirational. If we fail, it's not going to be catastrophic. We're not taking down the company. So you got to find the right project. That's just, does that make sense? Okay. Don't forget risks in terms of regulatory compliance, things like that, of course. Customer privacy. It might be cool to do a chat bot. It might be cool to do some kind of recommendation, but if you're doing something in a way that's not compliant, there's a lot of risks that can be open up. Okay, where does the data come from? Is it appropriate for the objective? So a lot of times people want to do cool AI projects and they don't realize that they don't have the data for it. So either they're going to have to buy it and it's very expensive or it's proprietary, or you're going to spend a lot of time getting data ready for it. So for those of you who work with machine learning models, a lot of the supervised stuff, I mean, all the supervised stuff requires trained data, labeled data. So it doesn't matter really what you want to do. If you don't have the labeled data, you're not using supervised learning, which is most of what the AI stuff is built on today. So do you have it? Is it prepared? Does it need to be labeled, tagged, cleaned, whatever?
I could sometimes think on that idea that I could get lost in the down the rabbit hole of, am I getting the right data? Is it the most appropriate data? And so, do you have any wisdom on how to not go too far down the rabbit hole to try and get the most appropriate data? Because often I'm confronted with projects where I have to go with what data I can get a hold of versus is it really appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've got a slide that's hidden at the back that has something specifically on the data and the assumptions to make on it. I have to go back and look for it at the end. But in general, if you have data that's kind of good enough, it's like a proxy, but you're not really confident that it's the data that you'll have in real life, then that would, for me, make it lower on my rubric of should I prioritize this project?
Okay.
Right? Because you're living in a land where you can measure something, but it doesn't necessarily represent reality. But if it's all you have and you want to just see if this thing holds water, you run a model with some data that's close and you get really kind of compelling results, then maybe it's worth going after the real stuff or beefing up that data with new fields or whatever.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, so is there a proven or plausible relationship between the data you have and the outcome you're hoping for? This is a big one that's lost. We have customer data. We should be able to predict, sure, whatever. We should be able to predict fraud. Well, why do we think that this data, right? Has there been any indication in the past that this data has been a good predictor of that? So a lot of times just having the data isn't enough. Could a human, is this just going to confirm your own intuition or does it do something smarter? Is it biased, right? We see all kinds of articles on responsible AI. Is there inherent bias in your data? Is there a ton of missings that we have to deal with? Is it personal? Can it lawfully be used, right? So these are all the questions you ask about data. This is obviously a big one with ML. And then when, what's the timeline? I mentioned 2 to 4 weeks is the average cycle for a POC. When can that start? Who needs to be involved? So this is obviously something that a project manager will care about. And then when will production happen? That's the key one. POC ending is just the litmus test. When will production happen is the really important one to plan. Okay, let's discuss. This is sort of the, I think, so actually, Paul, I think the question about the data, I think I actually had the slide right after, which is shocking.
Oh, yeah. That one, yeah.
But I think this is all I had for the formal.
So we'll get some people thinking about discussing and kicking around stuff, both with you and everyone on the call here. To kind of help us grease the wheels on that, feel free to unmute or start typing to say that you want to say something. I wanted to grease it wheels by asking a question. If you go back to your slides on the red, yellow, green, and determining fail fast and moving on, what wisdom do you have around the idea of a proof of concept that fails fast and the proof of concept worked versus the next slide where you have POC failures? What makes a POC a failure versus no, it was not a failure. It proved that we don't, it's not a good fit, right? Is there any wisdom about making that distinction? Because I can get bogged down in the, well, we aren't doing so. We're making a failed POC because we're not providing it all it needs. Whereas if it's a POC that showed that it's not a good fit because we don't have all the data and we're not going to, or we get lost in committees and no one really is leading it forward. Is that really a failed POC, or is that a POC that did what it's supposed to and showed that it's red?
Well, if it failed because of the wolves in sheep clothing, then what it taught you is that your POC process has failed. Your POC process is flawed. So tune the instrument first. And I would say ensure that the reason you failed wasn't just because people get busy and it was nobody's main job, right? Those types of things can kill POCs all the time, and there's sort of these lurking problems. So if you know, because you were working on it, that there was a lot of process problems, then I wouldn't necessarily say scrap the POC. If the actual outcomes and results were somewhat promising, then I would say try again, but with a tighter run ship.
Fair. Good. Any other discussion points, questions that have occurred to people? Feel free to type them in. We'll get them if you don't want to unmute, but unmute. I don't think there's 15 people trying to do that. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask the question, when you talked about POC to prod, how do you mitigate the risk of too often at our company, we'll try that POC concept and then the POC is good enough and nobody wants to commit the resources to follow through to a true production environment?
So I think that comes down to the politics of IT or whoever handles ops for ongoing jobs, whether or not they need to be involved in that small committee at the beginning. Because if they were always going to say, no, we can't support this, even if it's the best thing in the world, then that it's a no start situation. I think that happens at the top, to be honest with you, is that leadership has to say these types of modernizations and analytically driven processes have to be part of what we start to spend time on and invest in on the prod side. There are ways that the softwares themselves can help ease that burden so that IT doesn't have to carry it all alone. So whether you're using a cloud solution or a platform like Dataiku, they've intentionally built in ways that you can, with a single button, expose this as an API. And now your web developer backgrounds can go and use it without having to involve more people to get it production ready. Or Dataiku, you can kind of lift design projects right into prod, a running automation node that's like set up to real data systems, and you never have to get more people, as long as your data scientists are pretty proficient. So tools are making it easier to do that, but ultimately I think that's a leadership thing, unfortunately.
Sure. Any other questions? Otherwise I can give you a second. Unmute. Otherwise, Tony Olson made a great point in the chat. For a company that is just starting out in more advanced analytics or data science, there's a quote: "We shouldn't be looking for certainty. Instead, we should be asking ourselves, when do we have enough evidence to make good decisions?" Nice. And Ron follows it up. He agrees, often the cost to productionalize becomes a surprise after everyone gets excited about the proof of concept. Cost in terms of people, maintenance, data prep, and ETL licensing.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. And that scoping, you really don't do that until after you prove that the thing holds water to begin with. So there can be a bit of a disconnect there, but we do have some papers out about the technical debt and about the economics of AI and the cost to maintain these projects over time. So what happens is you kind of take this big, like the most beautiful hanging fruit first, because they're like these really attractive, cool projects, and they actually take a decent amount to maintain. And over time, then you start picking off the ones that were sort of less exciting, but still important. And those still take a lot to maintain. And so over time, your maintenance cost actually is rising while your ROI on the benefits is decreasing. So this economic trend is why reusability is the only thing that's going to help you out of that. Being able to do each one not in a silo, to be able to monitor projects in bulk, to automatically monitor for drift and breakages and CI/CD pipelines that will fix things kind of not automatically, but it doesn't take so much burden to maintain them.
Is that what you describe as kind of the offset, the counter argument to the idea? There's a couple points in the chat that if you be upfront about setting expectations what the true cost to deploy, the proof of concept never happens. As soon as you bring up the requirements of the actual production, then people start to lose interest. I heard you say, more information on, well, the technical debt getting included as part of why the costs of this proof of concept are helped. Triggered. I caught off that, but do you have any thoughts on when you are upfront about those requirements, you kill your proof of concept?
I don't know that there's a one size fits all answer for how transparent you are with what the total what the total cost of ownership of this project will be. If it's with a new software, that's kind of a known thing, right? If this works, then we have to license this. It's going to cost X. But if the cost is more in manpower or compute, which is probably more realistic, which is a very hidden cost. What does it take to spin up those clusters every day, and blah, blah, blah. So it definitely needs to be part of the scoping, because a lot of times you'll do a POC without any care to the compute. And then you show it to somebody in IT and they're like, we can't keep that GPU box on all the time.
So
they need to be involved.
There's a question there that's in there. Is part of selecting a good POC the return on investment for the anticipated productionalized costs?
That should be part of the pricing, yeah. If it's going to cost you a ton of money to run it, then that should be part of the pricing, right? Is the marginal benefit worth it? But again, a lot of the new software that's out there and the solutions for even your existing infrastructures are now helping solve those pains. So if you can make it so that every time somebody writes, builds a model, that somebody doesn't have to then recode it in Java or something to make it fit into your existing jobs, then that's just a cost that never materializes if you can just put something into prod more easily. We can reduce that debt.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue we see that we run into more is around when you go down the road of a POC, right? And you want to start pulling together data. Well, to get a POC done in 2 to 4 weeks, you're not going to spend a huge amount of time building out a data dictionary and a catalog and defining everything. You want to pull it together to prove that the information is valuable, right? And then your POC proves it's valuable. Well, now nobody wants to spend the resources to go through the data dictionary work because your POC already showed that the data was valuable. So I'm getting enough value out of the POC. Why do I need to spend all this time doing this back end metadata and all this other garbage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So how do you get the buy-in then to now go back after you've proven a POC can provide value with the quick and dirty approach to get the real good quality work behind the data done?
That's an excellent question.
Hey, Dave, I actually got a question for you on that. Are you POCing like advanced analyses and data science at that stage, or are you POCing a specific use case?
We've done both. The AI project that we did, we really, I mean, there was no heavy amount of data dictionary, and it was, hey, let's slap together some data sets. And in our case, it was about driver accidents and safety. So could we predict which of our drivers would have an accident, right? Well, we don't have a well-defined data dictionary with all the metadata and the data sets. What we did was said, well, this data set makes sense to throw in here, and this data makes sense to throw in there. We pulled that all together, and we slapped it into, and had consultants help us build a model that would tell us, oh, these drivers are more likely, right? Great. Now we have these more likely drivers, but nobody wants to now go back and really cleanse and define and build really quality data sets, because the data we pulled together continues to pull without a problem, right? And feeds the data into that model. So how do I justify spending a whole bunch of man hours now to make really good quality data sets when the pulled together stuff worked? And in the other scenario, we, hey, somebody just wants to look at how can I analyze this data within the business. I've got a business problem I want to answer. Okay, well, we can grab this, this, and this, throw it together, give it to you, let you analyze it. We do that very, very fast, right? Which the business loves, but then nobody wants to commit the resources once they have their answer to then really improve it and set it up for success in the future.
If you're doing that, all that data prep, like what I feel like you're talking about is data preparation and the recurring costs of data preparation. And definitely. I think that, Christina, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that, but I always feel like that's the unsung hero in a lot of these POCs and a lot of these projects where the data sets and the data, especially when you're getting in early and don't really know what it sort of looks like, it's the unsung hero. I think my big thing there is doing that data preparation once, and then potentially enhancing it in the future. Like I would question why you wouldn't be able to move production if it's if you have all the data, if you've already prepped and cleansed it, why is there additional costs in the prepping and cleaning that data to move to production? I mean, because then it's just a pipeline, right?
It's a fair question, Tony. The question is, when you're doing a fast turn POC, I'm not spending a huge amount of time building the data structure and ensuring that it supports a enterprise data warehouse level of structuring and definition and all of that. We're pulling data sets together, showing the business what that data is. They get to see the ugly stuff and the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, Christina, maybe you can comment on that, but I guess my perspective on that, and just speaking as one person out of the many on this call, is that there's enterprise data structures that are focused on like a lot of BI and reporting, and then there's those data structures are consumed by analytics efforts, and that work after the analytics effort is done doesn't always go back and fit back into that enterprise reporting structure. The output does. The output of that solution does, but I don't think that the steps along the way necessarily do, because your pipeline at that set, the analytic pipeline is already set. Christina, I don't know, maybe you
Steve's got something to say. His hand is up. What do you guys say, Steve?
I have a question for Dave and a comment. I'll save the question. Well, no, I'll do the question first. It sounds like, Dave, that the POC that you're putting together so rapidly, and where people accept it and, hey, that works for us. Okay, thank you, bye. It sounds to me as if up front there wasn't a real determination of the ultimate value for this project, and so it turned out, when you got the POC completed and everybody looks at it and says, hey, that's good, and then you're kind of left, but wait, we can do better. We can do better. It's that proving that value beyond the model. So I'm wondering if that's your situation. Now, my comment, you're reminding me of the Star Trek Next Generation episode where they resurrected Montgomery Scott. And he's in the engineering department with Geordi LaForge. And Geordi LaForge is asked by Captain Picard how long it's going to take. And Geordi says, oh, about an hour. And Scotty says, you didn't tell him how long it would really take, did you? How could you expect it to be like a miracle worker if you tell him how long it's really going to take? So, like, this is part of that too, I think.
Okay.
Comment finished.
Christina?
I want to have Steve's voice. You have a beautiful radio voice. That is my comment.
Paid a lot of money for this, Christina.
It's like so awesome. It's interesting to the question about, okay, you take dirty data that's quick and dirty, you make it into something that's just beautiful enough to answer a question, but nothing at the source actually changed. Okay, we're still collecting terrible dirty data that had to be transformed before it could be used. So that is always a problem. I mean, that is just one of those things, right? The amount of time we spend cleaning data that just should be collected better. But the only thing I could think of immediately is, and I apologize, I'm coming here from the lens of our product. This is the product that I know the best. I guess I could say the same of SaaS as well, but the idea would be to be able to automate at least the ad hoc data prep or ETL pipeline that you did to get the data in a shape for that ad hoc analysis. So that even if the source still isn't the right data and we never actually put it back up to the data warehouse in that usable form, it's an automated button. It's a set it and forget it, or it's an on-demand type, click this, do it again. Do it for me again, so that it's almost as if it's in the data warehouse ready. And that's an imperfect solution to the problem, but at least from the user's perspective, they're not doing the same frustrating data prep over and over just because the EDW is not changing. And at least with our solution, people can automate that on their own without needing IT. You kind of just set up a sequence of batch steps or whatever, and you hit go, or you schedule it, and it's, to the user, it abstracts away that pain.
Nice. Any more discussions? This is as we're wrapping down closer to the time when I'm going to ask everybody to turn on their webcams. So get your questions in now, related specifically to our proof of concept topic. Anyone else? Feel free to type them in if you feel too shy to unmute.
I'm kind of stuck on, when we do proof of concepts and from a consulting perspective, we usually do an agile methodology with a definition of done. And I think that since my time with Skyline, that's gone a lot better than when I was in the corporate world. It was like we would do these quick little proof of concepts that had business value, and they were kind of put together quickly, not productionalized by any means. But then we had to get into queue with all the other data engineering efforts, and we had to get prioritized and approved above other data engineering efforts in order to productionalize that. And that's very difficult. I mean, especially with citizen data scientists doing a lot of work, if they then want to take something to the enterprise level, there's that big IT beast or whatever the beast is that's helping to productionalize the data portion, or to make this happen, they got to get in line. And I struggle with seeing it as corporations that occur, and I don't know if anybody has any ideas on how to improve that.
Do you guys see kind of systemically, because you're in industry, I mean, do you see CDOs or CIOs putting more attention on staffing kind of ops for AI or AI ops, and they stand outside traditional BI and ETL, keep the lights on type roles, but they're specifically for ML ops and delivering these types of projects? Are they hiring for that?
I don't know. I seem to think that those, when we're consulted to a company and we are brought in for a purpose and there is a contract and a timeline and money that's put out, therefore, with that comes more of a commitment. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, as a contractor, that you sort of come in, you prove the value, you deliver a package, but then the baby's never delivered once it gets in the queue.
Well, we have to, we or they, the company has to then, make the decision to continue that and to invest in it further to take it forward. What I was saying is that when I've done in-house projects and been in the corporate world, it's been very challenging to get a POC into the productionalizing due to staffing and really having to go through a lot of business justification up against very large projects that these IT folks and data engineers are having to work that may not be even in the analytics space. They might be a data conversion, an ERP conversion. They're being pulled in all these directions. And you want to try and get productionalize your POC and get that to have priority. And even with the best business case, one of my clients that I worked on a POC for, we're just having a lot of challenges with getting the corporate buy-in to invest data engineering dollars behind it.
Mm-hmm. One case study I can tell you about is GE Aviation out of Ohio. So they set up their data and analytics practice. They set up their data and analytics practice in such a way that users could actually productionalize their own stuff in a self-service way. Now, I realize that not all things, like really big things or really risky things, you shouldn't let citizen data scientists or even regular data scientists just push to prod. But there are a lot of situations in which prod just means automation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not like it's being embedded into the credit scoring underbelly of the insurer or something like that, right? It can be much smaller than that. And so they set up automated controls where users could push a button and there is a series of macros that would run to make sure that the project passed certain gates. So for example, if the data set was over 2 gigs, it would not pass a gate. And they would say, you need to partition your data because either by some striating variable, date or some other categorical variable to make it smaller pieces, right? And so it would throw up a flag. They would tell the user how to fix the problem, and then they'd hit try again. And if it passed all the checks in 2 minutes, we would, in an automated way, shift it over to the production server. There are some mappings that IT had control over. So if you're in this data warehouse that's just for a sandbox, then we're going to connect you to this real data warehouse. And it's not really the real data warehouse. It's still a sandbox for IT, but it's more real than your playpen. And so for the end users, they felt like they were able to get their stuff into production in, from 2 months into 2 minutes in some cases for small projects. And I think that eased a lot of the pains for the ones that were not super mission critical. More of that. So you guys probably do self-service BI, right? You probably have Tableaus and Power BIs, and you're giving some power. It's the same kind of thing. Maybe your report doesn't get to the CEO, but you can productionalize it so that every day it hits your inbox. Does what you would do manually.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole, I've had similar experiences to that in the past. And what I found was that getting a decision maker on board before really starting those efforts was really huge. It took some selling. Like there's a product owner that we had to make absolutely sure that, she was on board with this. We're like, okay, this is going to be something we can really deliver to the customer that I know they're going to find useful. I had to kind of sell it to her first before actually going through and doing the whole effort. But if you had that buy-in first, then that kind of paved the way for that proof of concept to actually get into production. But making that sell initially, you have to kind of keep that in mind ahead of time. So if you've already done that and you're just like, hey, look at this cool thing I've done. Can we make this happen? It's like, yeah, we'll just get in line. But that decision maker has to be aware of it and on board so they can fight that battle to make it really happen.
Yeah, one of my current POC is the product owners in that process now and trying to get in line. Because there is some manual steps to it, being that it was a POC that's not productionalized. So yeah, they're trying to get in line to make it happen.
Yeah, and that's so frustrating when that happens because it's like it eventually, like I think I had 2 or 3 POCs kind of fall to the wayside because of that, because we just used it just in our downtime, so to speak. We're like, let's make something cool happen and then let's wow them with it and make that sell. And they're like, yeah, that's great, but we can't get to this for another year. So.
And mine's functioning good enough to get them by. And that's, it's okay for now until they can get in line to get the engineering done, the data engineering done on the more global scale.
So where's the camera, Ashley?
Sorry, I was eating my dinner and I forgot to turn it back on. So I'm back.
You're done now.
There
we go. Cool. Any more questions? Let's everybody start turning on cameras and connecting and thanking Christina.
Thanks,
we have
guys.
other questions or thoughts here. People were talking in the chat about, they'd love to see the slides. Should I paste your email in there? And if you send it to us, we'll put it on the meetup site.
Sure. Sounds good. Any last questions for me? I'm going to go put my little people to bed.
Anything else for Christina? Going once,
going
twice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah,
That's
had
awesome.
a lot of fun. All right, talk
right.
to you later. See ya.
If you have to drop off, you can, but now's the time when those that missed the chance to talk to others that you come to see in the meetup should turn on a camera, unmute, and say hi. And if anyone has any questions or thoughts for the group, make certain to let us know here. If we've got stuff, make sure you can get the next one in February on your calendar. Get registered on the meetup site so it can get you on your calendar and that kind of thing. I'm so glad somebody stayed and got their camera on. Good to see everybody.
What's the topic next month?
It is. I closed my window. Scott, go. Say it.
Yeah, basically we're going to talk about Snowflake, but within an Azure environment, which isn't necessarily an anomaly of any sort, but it does seem like it's maybe not the most typical implementation. So I'm going to talk about how in many ways that can make sense.
Awesome.
That sounds really interesting. I'd love to go to that, but I'm going to be on a plane. So I will have to catch the recording.
Yep, I believe we'll be recording. So.
I just got certified in Snowflake, so I'd be very excited to see that.
Good. Yeah, and this will, for the record, just be from my perspective. So, in some ways, it's I wouldn't say a counter to Snowflake, but for example, one option is to use Snowflake as a data lake. And I'll talk about maybe some reasons why you might want to use, say, Azure Data Lake Storage in addition to that.
Thanks. That's good. We're lining up events. Nicole has been putting out firmer and firmer events as we go into the year. We'll be anticipating them being online for quite some time. But if we ever get that chance to be in person again, we'll try and make a special event out of it. So,
Say, Paul.
Yes.
I started the meeting late. Did you mention the Green Bay Power BI group coming up in a week?
I have not. Go ahead, Steve.
All right. We're having a Teams meeting for the Green Bay Power BI user group next Thursday at 2:00 in the afternoon. The site or the link to the site is available on LinkedIn. If you go look for Paul, he has an event there that you'll see. It's clearly labeled as the Green Bay Power BI user group, and the Teams link is right there in the meeting notification. So everyone is welcome. We have a whole bunch of speakers, like 5, I think, that are going to be speaking during that meeting. And if you go to the site, you'll see what it's about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So some of our first-time comers that I finally got in here, any comments? What do you think, Jeff? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, it was informative. Like I said, we're just starting our journey, but like I said, we're probably gonna have a lot of POCs, and hey, we're gonna do this, and we've already discussed that. We'll probably do something to kind of prove the concept and throw it away. So we're telling our, not only internally, but our business folks that, hey, we may get this out there into production, but in a year or 2 years we may completely redo it. So especially from the back end piece, of we're just trying to get us out of the crystal reports era and into the modern era. So it's a big leap for us.
Yeah. We're doing a lot of changes, and from Unpack's a manufacturing company. We're moving out of the data center, so a lot of stuff's moving to the cloud, and all these topics are pretty interesting. We did some proof of concepts that didn't really resonate, so that's why my question was around, like, is it a failed proof of concept, or is it just a proof of concept that showed that it's not a good fit? So
well, it educates, if nothing else, just like R&D. So.
Does anybody have some POCs that went very well and moved on into production, and they could share some of their thoughts on what worked for them?
Yeah, this is John Signoretti. I actually did a proof of concept with Associated Bank, and they had layoffs back in September, and now they reposted my position. I was a senior level, so they reposted my position as a level 2, and now they're looking to hire a data architect because I put a POC together, and now they need somebody to do it. So it makes me laugh.
Nicole, go ahead, Paul.
Mine was not necessarily a straightforward proof of concept as much as a technique that I like to hear a bunch about, which is where it's self-service. So it was a small idea outside of IT. They had some data. We helped them put together an example of value within their department, and now it is one of the main dashboards at a use at a corporate level. So to me, what succeeded there was kind of enabling that self-service. The people already kind of were experts at their own data and generated their own value. It wasn't like, I feel a lot of times as an IT guy, I have to like keep it proving that there's value in all this work. They were pulling this, and so I think that enabled something that was kind of let's see if this works, to we just kept going until it was a major tool.
Mm-hmm. I think envy and it works good sometimes, especially working with different areas of a corporation. One area has a great dashboard that shows them wonderful things.
Sure.
And if you get the envy going with that amongst their peers, you can get other stuff going, I think.
I think the challenge we run into is we've actually had quite a few really successful POCs, but the POCs have been successful enough, and the way we utilize ClickSense, it is productionalized. There's nothing the user has to do different. There's nothing that is manual. So once our POC is in place, that's where we're struggling with getting any resources from the business or agreement from the business to really take it to the next level, because it's like, oh, that's exactly what I needed, right? Mm-hmm. And then they want to just stop there.
Well,
which
I was
maybe
thinking,
that's okay.
yeah, I was thinking as you were describing that a few times tonight, I was like, does that mean that it's reached that correct sweet spot where the business is getting the value they need without over investing?
Yes, but as we think about trying to create mature data sets, right, and data dictionaries and defining and cleansing and all these things that we want to do with our data, what it does is just keeps proving that I don't need to do that, or that the business feels that they don't need to do that, right? Because they're getting value with the data exactly the way it is without doing that work. And so the fight to really advance and mature that data becomes a very uphill battle.
Scott, you've done a lot of POCs. Do you have any thoughts?
That I often don't do them proper. The whole measurable whatever, sometimes, it's on the side trying to get it to work. A recent failure, which maybe is not this coming Snowflake topic, but the next one was Snowflake doesn't really have version control. So I had the idea of if I were to export the schema, write something that translates it to SQL Server type syntax, then I can use SQL's tools to do a schema compare and generate my scripts for me, translate it back to Snowflake. Overall, somewhat successful, but enough nuances where I'm not sure if we'll productionalize it yet, so I kind of shelved it. But sometimes playing with things like that, I'll call it a proof of concept, but admittedly, I'm not necessarily formalizing it, time boxing it. So I think I certainly have done some more structured ones, but more times than not, that's my loose use of the term POC.
That's fair.
Tony, you had talked about, getting that ROI defined and everything ahead of time. Can you just kind of I'd love to hear how you guys are pulling that off before and still getting people to buy into doing the POC.
Yeah, a lot of it it's assessing both business value when you're talking about the use cases up front, and then also speaking in generalities about like data accessibility and data quality. So, for us, you're kind of ranking those two criteria measures, and you're saying, all right, well, this is the solution that the business is looking for might be something just very descriptive. It might be descriptive analytics, but it would drive high business value and have a future use case that's more maybe more machine learning appropriate. So from that perspective, that's kind of how we rank them. And then after that, I think I can't remember who said it, but somebody said something about having that having a business leader. I think it was actually might have been Christina, having a business leader as the champion. You need a strong business leader as the champion, and that's willing to commit the resources to the analysis. And that's a big part of it, because a lot of times IT and your data science team or whoever it might be has what they think the data means, and whether you have it in the data dictionary or not, like it might mean something completely different. So I think that's just really important to engage them in that process then.
Got it. Thanks.
Good stuff.
I think
Any
for
other-
this stage of the meeting, Paul, that like when we get to this multiple camera thing on, everyone should have an adult beverage that they're showing and drinking.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like it.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
very true.
We'll put that in the agenda. Break for a beverage run.
Exactly.
Come back for networking.
So, Paul, I see that you have two, it looks like, riddles behind you.
Yes.
So
Yes.
one is stick around.
Nicely
What
done.
what is the other? You'll get it. You'll get over it.
Hey,
There
you're
we go.
pretty good at these.
Nice.
I like to have these to encourage people to use webcams at work to see if they can
Nice.
solve my puzzles. So
Nice.
it's good to see that we have great attendance, and people keep coming back and hearing our topics, so that's nice. The meetup has been going strong online, so it's great to have everybody coming back in and connecting in this way. So one area that we're going to be experimenting with is trying to do a breakout room with particular subtopics. That way we can encourage the kind of clusters that happened when we were getting together in person. Teams just announced that it had breakout functionality, and we've been trying it out.
Yeah. Cool. Yep. We've been testing it out. It works really nice.
Yep.
Cool.
Anything else?
Any other shares or thoughts?
I have
What'd
a
you
thought
think,
I want to share
Danielle?
with the group so everybody's heads up.
Okay.
This is not specifically on topic of POC, but Paper Transport's going to be looking for an experienced business analyst, probably within the next coming months. So if you know somebody who's looking, ideally it would be an experienced business analyst, but we're looking to add to our team and try to really, we're in an interesting position where we're shifting from what used to be the unicorns who understand the business and IT and can talk to a business person and develop it all the way through, to hiring developers and having a business analyst who can define for the developer the work they need to be doing.
Cool.
So if anybody knows anybody who's looking or is interested, feel free to share my contact information.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Chair. So Danny, what did you think as a first-time attendee?
It was good. Not being super technical, it's a little over my head, but it's always really interesting. I love just seeing so many people that are so passionate within this space too. And now that I'm going to be the enterprise application, data analytics and insight space, I really do need to just dive in. And I know it's going to take a little bit to really get there, but it's really cool because even the next one with Scott, where it's like Snowflake, we have so many different partnerships that tech systems, like with Snowflake, we have a partnership. It's going to be really cool for me to just hear a lot of the things that are happening within the industry and within local companies that I'll be able to hopefully start being able to connect the dots and hopefully help a lot of companies in the local area just to educate them too on what I'm hearing at these meetups. And so thank you so much for letting a really non-technical person come and just sit and try to soak it all in.
I'm glad it was worthwhile for you, and I like having you because having local area companies and consultants and recruiters understand this space and get some sense of it helps us a lot too. And later in the year, if we ever get back in person, it's great to have support from tech systems and other places to
when we can actually start having some spend. I will 100% help out wherever I can with food or whatever. So
appreciate it.
And Ashley, you crushed those puzzles. You made me feel really dumb because it took like 30 minutes or more for me with Paul, and I was like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Thank you. I was like, I got the stick around one at first, but it kept bugging me because I couldn't make out what the second one was. So I was like,
I thought they were together, so I think that's what was throwing me off, and I was like, I don't know what. Yeah, so I tried. And
yeah, I remember one from before where he had two, so I was like, okay, I know they're separate. I'm going with that assumption that they're separate. So yeah.
You crushed it.
Thank you.
Nice work. Great.
Thanks, guys.
The recording and slide deck will be on the LinkedIn page.
Excellent.
We're working on getting through a suggestion by Turner, a YouTube channel established, and that'll be coming next.
Nice.
Cool.
Excellent.
It's a great idea.
Well, it's good to see everyone.
Thanks everybody for coming. Having a great evening. Be sure to sign up for the next one.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
Will do.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Night.
See ya.
Hey there. I don't know why it's coming through on Skype. That's weird. Let me call you back on Teams here.